אבא שלי היה גאה מאוד כל חייו בפעולת מלון המלך דוד. אבא שלי, דוד יעקבי, פיקד על חוליית הסבלים שהם נשאו את כתי חלב ובהם חומר נפץ והטמינו במלון המלך דוד, שהיה בימים ההם המפקדה הראשית של הבריטים בארץ ישראל. הרגו באותה פעולה כ-91 בני אדם, יהודים, ערבים ובריטים. רק כשבועיים לפני מותו, הבן זוג שלי שאל אותו אם יש משהו בחיים שלו שהוא מתחרט עליו. ואז פתאום הוא אמר, הייתי מבקש עוד רבע שעה. לרבע שעה נוספת, לו רק הייתה עוד רבע שעה, להתראה שהם נתנו לבריטים לפנות את המלון, אולי כל אותם 91 בני אדם לא היו נהרגים.
That moment that I knew it's going to be very dangerous, people are going to get killed. If they won't listen to the warning, leave the place, there is a bomb.
Never use them, never. There were always battles between armed men and armed forces.
May 1945. Hitler is dead. World War II is over. 6 million Jews have been murdered by the Nazis. The survivors leave the camps and struggle to make their way home. But where is home?
היהודים נרדפו גם באירופה וגם במדינות ערב. ליהודים לא היה בית, והיהודים נרצחו, והיהודים נטבחו, והיהודים גורשו, והיהודים נהרגו. וזה היה לחיות או לחדול. זה היה או חיסול העם היהודי, אל מול לכונן בית יהודי בארץ ישראל.
In 1922, the League of Nations grants the British a mandate to create a Jewish national home in Palestine. Protecting the rights of Jews and Arabs soon proves to be an impossible task. Violent skirmishes break out between Jews and Arabs.
אבא שלי היה אידיאליסט. הוא חשב שהרעיון החירות, על החירות הלאומית, הוא אידיאל שחייבים לשאוף אליו וחייבים להגיע אליו בכל מחיר. הייתה תחושה של לעולם לא עוד. לא יטבחו ביהודים ולא ישחטו את היהודים. הוא היה מוכן להקריב את נפשו, הוא והחברים שלו היו מוכנים למות למען האידיאל והרעיון של החירות.
Arab-Jewish tensions mount. The British are increasingly forced to intervene. Pressures intensify when vast numbers of Jews flee to Israel from Europe. Jewish organizations transport Jewish refugees to Palestine, but the British refuse them entry. Arriving at port after their harrowing journey, the migrants are told to go back. This infuriates the militant Jewish resistant movement Irgun, which resorts to a tried and tested remedy: terror.
I was only a little boy when we had a visit from the second in command of the Irgun. He was in Ireland for the purpose of meeting with the senior officers of the IRA to study their methods of attacking the British as they did then, and they imitated many of their tactics. My father believed that the only way the Jewish people could survive as a people was by having their own state, by re-establishing the state of Israel. And he believed that this could only be done by force of arms, that the only thing the British understood was force of arms. They had never given a country its independence by diplomacy or talking nice to them. The King David Hotel was the headquarters virtually of the British officers. They all assembled in the King David Hotel. That was their club, their residence of many of them. It was a legitimate target. And Irgun did warn them that they were going to destroy it. I don't know how factual it is that there were many Jews in it, but I don't think there were that many. And if there were, well, they were enjoying themselves having gin and tonics with the Brits.
The stylish King David Hotel serves as the headquarters of the British in Palestine. The entire 5th floor has been requisitioned by the army. Local staff are employed to provide administrative assistance.
My father was promoted to some job in the administration, in the center office of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, helping with the British administration. I was 3 years old, and my brother was 1 month and 2 days.
There is a file from the Jewish resistance movement ordering to execute or to carry out as soon as possible operation of the Malonchik. It's a code name for the King David Hotel. עליכם לבצע בהקדם האפשרי את המלונצ'יק ואת הבית של עבדך משיחך. הודיעונו על המועד. מוטב בבת אחת. אין לפרסם את הזהות של הגוף המבצע, לא פרסום במפורש ואף לא ברמיזה. And in paragraph 6 it's written, for God's sake, not personal terror.
זהו, הם התחפשו לערבים, פיקד על חוליית הסבלים, שהם נשאו את קטעי חלב ובהם חומר נפץ, והטמינו במלון המלך דוד. הכניסו את הקדים אל האגף הדרומי.
The telephone exchange is set up in the basement. It's manned by 6 women working for the ATS, the Auxiliary Territorial Service. Their commander is alerted by the noise. He and a fellow officer investigate the goings-on and catch the intruders.
באיזשהו שלב, לא הבינו מי הם, אבל התחיל ירי, ירו עליהם. אחד מהפורצים נהרג, גל שמו. הם נשו על נפשם. במקביל, לחברות ארגון הצבאי הלאומי הזהירו את הבריטים. הם נתנו להם אזהרה של כרבע שעה.
The girl who had to run from one place to another to make a telephone call, it was not that easy. She had to ask permission in a certain shop to make a telephone call. Maybe she started her mission 30 minutes earlier. But until she called, she made the actual calls, it took time. And then the calls reached the hotel much later.
והציעו להם לפנות את המלון. הבריטים לא פינו את המלון, בין אם הם לא הספיקו, כי זה לא היה מספיק זמן, ובין אם הם לא האמינו, הם לא שערו בנפשם שיצליחו לחדור למפקדה הכי ראשית והכי לעומק. זהו, וכל האגף הדרומי קרס. וזהו, זה היה בעצם מגה פיגוע עם מספר ההרוגים והנפגעים הכי גדול לאורך הרבה שנים בעולם כולו.
"65 deaths are reported, and there is little or no hope of survival for any of the 58 missing. Nearly 50 others were injured. The Jewish terrorist organization, Irgun openly admitted responsibility for the bombing. Many arrests have been made. Leaders of the Jewish agency have expressed horror at the dastardly crime perpetrated by a gang of desperados. Mr. Attlee in the House of Commons declared, "The British government will not be diverted by acts of violence in their search for a just and final solution of the Palestine problem."
My father was killed at the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. The Irgun never admitted that there was such a short time for informing the hotel, though they say there were at least 30 minutes. It's absolutely not true.
The paramilitary organization Irgun, founded by the Russian Jew Zev Jabotinsky, claims responsibility for the attack.
We have a Hamashkif daily newspaper from the 22nd of July 1946 telling about the bombing of the King David Hotel. 41 הרוגים ו-52 נעדרים בפיצוץ משרדי הממשלה בירושלים. מספר הפצועים 53.
התקופה הזו של הפיצוץ במלון המלך דוד היה חלק מתוך תקופה של המאבק בשליט הבריטי, שמנע מאיתנו להקים כאן מדינה, התמודדות עם הערבים והטרור הערבי, ומתוך התקופה הזו היה גם האירוע הזה שהוא אחד, הוא אירוע מאוד קשה, הוא אירוע מאוד משמעותי, שלא הייתה בו כוונה גם להרוג אזרחים, אבל הוא אירוע אחד מתוך תקופה שצריך לבחון אותה לעומק ולהבין את ההקשרים, ואני כילד התחנכתי על התקופה, לאו דווקא על האירוע הזה.
Jabotinsky believes that mass immigration of Jews to Palestine is the only way to establish a free Jewish state. He is also convinced that this plan can only be achieved through armed resistance.
This picture was taken in Warsaw in 1935 in a meeting of the leaders of the revisionist movement in Poland. Here you see Zev Jabotinsky, the leader of the revisionist movement, Menachem Begin, and David Stern, my father, who was one of the leaders of Beitar youth movement in Poland.
הסיפור של הגדוד היהודי הראשון הוא הסיפור של זאב ז'בוטינסקי הפרקטי, שבא ומחבר בין החזון להקים את מדינת ישראל בארץ ישראל, לבין ההבנה שכדי להקים את החזון, לממש את החזון הזה, רבים בארץ לא יודעים מי היה זאב ז'בוטינסקי, אבל הם חושבים שהם יודעים מי היה זאב ז'בוטינסקי. ובאים ומתייגים אותו ומצמידים לו כותרות בלי לדעת. למשל, באים ואומרים שז'בוטינסקי היה פשיסט קיצוני. אבל לא בדיוק מבינים מה הייתה תורת קיר הברזל שעליה הוא דיבר. באים וטוענים שהוא היה שונא ערבים, אבל אם אתה בא וקורא את קיר הברזל, ז'בוטינסקי מבהיר בקיר הברזל, לא שונא ערבים אני, אבל חשוב לי שקודם כל תהיה כאן מדינה יהודית, שבה יכירו הערבים, ואז נוכל לכונן שלום.
My father met with Jabotinsky in London. Jabotinsky recruited my father to go to America to raise funding. And my father went to America using all his connections with the Irish out there whom he had dealings with during Ireland's fight for independence.
It's from your dad. That's the letter from the Department of
All right.
Justice
Outlining
why they won't give permission to Jews to come in.
If we, as the Jewish people, didn't do something to save themselves, no one else was going to.
How often did I tell American Jews when speaking to them in America that if they did not make up their minds quickly, the problem would be solved by extermination.
My father was very, very young. He was like 16 when he joined the Irgun. He came from a very Orthodox religious family, so he put aside his Bible and he took up a rifle, so to speak. He had tremendous admiration for Jabotinsky. He adored Jabotinsky. He very much agreed with Jabotinsky's kind of sentiment and his worldview and his political kind of outlook. My father rose in the ranks very rapidly, and in 1937, he was sent to Europe to facilitate in bringing illegal immigration of Jews from Europe to Palestine. My father kind of shuttled back and forth between Poland, primarily Geneva, London, and Paris, and that's where his relationship with Jabotinsky developed. And in 1939, after the Nazis invaded Poland, Jabotinsky came to the conclusion that the only place to be now was in America and to work with American Jewry, and so he asked my father to accompany him. My father had no problem calling people and going up to people and asking them, famous people, people with status, to support his cause. And he had a lot of chutzpah. They staged two very, very elaborate pageants. One of them was called We Will Never Die, and this was in 1943, and it focused on the extermination of the Jews.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is the scene of one of the nation's most spectacular pageants, titled We Will Never Die. This mammoth memorial is dedicated to the 2 million civilian Jewish dead of Europe. The cast includes 1,000 volunteer actors and actresses, written by Ben Hecht as a living testimonial.
And the second one was A Flag is Born, and it focused on the struggle for independence in Palestine. He accumulated an incredibly talented group of people around him. I mean, he had Ben Hecht, they had Stella Adler, and they would have Paul Mooney, and they had Marlon Brando, and they had like very, very big names, kind of Hollywood names, who volunteered, basically, who kind of gave of their time and of their talent as part of the cause.
We sold out, we had to pay tickets, even though everybody was a volunteer, but still it costs a lot of money, a thing like this. 2 weeks before the evening, every single of 22,000 tickets was sold, and we decided to chance it. You know, we felt that there is a surge of interest, and we issued an announcement that the thing will be an hour earlier, and we made another one at 10:30 in the evening, and the police wouldn't give us a permit. They says there's never been so many people there on a non-sporting event. Of course, we overcame them and they gave us. We filled Madison Square Garden twice in the same night, and this was early 43, January, February 43. And who were we? Unknown people. I mean, we used big names, but it wasn't the names who pulled them.
Hillel Cook has more than enough chutzpah. He not only gains the support of Hollywood stars, but also mobilizes influential senators, first to save Jews from the clutches of the Nazis, and later to finance the emergence of a free Jewish state.
One day my sister told me that she had a job and it was passing out a basket at a play called A Flag is Born. She asked me if I was interested, and I was thrilled to be given the opportunity. It was after the play was over, Luther Adler came forward and spoke to the audience about why they were going to raise money and to help the Zionist cause. He said, now these volunteers will pass baskets through the audience, and we would put a basket on one side of a row, and then it would come back filled with dollar bills. People who went to the theater and who went to see A Flag is Born were well-dressed, and they looked like conventional theatergoers. I didn't count the money that we had raised. It wasn't one of those things where you waved the basket afterwards and said, hey, I got $500 and you only got $100. We felt we were in the presence of something very important because we thought if the State of Israel was born, we would have contributed something to help make it happen. And the audience were, for the most part, I think, extremely sympathetic to the message and happy to pony up. Where the money literally went, did it go to the more militant Irgun or did it go to the Haganah? And I remember one of the older folks there assured me that it went to the more radical cause, but I didn't know that at the time.
The Irgun was a hierarchical organization. I mean, it fancied itself a kind of paramilitary organization, so hierarchy and status was very significant. And my father was probably amongst the higher-ranking members of the Irgun, and so therefore he was significant in determining or deciding who would be the head of the Irgun in Palestine. And the person who was chosen to be the head of the Irgun was Begin. I don't think that Begin was his choice, but he authorized the choice. And I don't think he had a very strong opinion about it this way or that way. But as time went by, and as he had more and more contact with Begin, he came to regret that decision very much.
Begin grows up in Russia. His parents sent him to Beitar, Zev Jabotinsky's Zionist youth movement. After being appointed leader of the Irgun in Palestine in 1943, the organization resumes acts of terror against the Arabs and the British. The British have their hands full, tracking down and deactivating Jewish terrorists. The attack on the King David Hotel is a huge setback for the British. But the final blow comes when they receive a message that 2 British sergeants have been taken hostage by the Irgun. An exhaustive search and rescue begins. The 2 sergeants are eventually found, hung in an orchard north of Tel Aviv.
I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Mrs. Martin, who is broken-hearted and prostrate at the terrible news of the loss of her son, she wishes me to tell the country that she demands the body of her son to be brought back here, and hopes that the whole world will support her in this. And let us hope that we can find a solution to this terrible problem in Palestine and bring an end to all this unnecessary murdering of young British innocent servicemen.
I was put into the 6th Airborne Forces. I went over on D-Day, went right through Belgium, Holland, Germany, met up with the Russians. I knew who I was when I was in Normandy, but in Palestine, it seemed like a different world to me. You couldn't get through to a lot of people and find out what was going on. I was sort of lost. And I think a lot of my comrades were the same, you know. It was a strange feeling out there.
I was called up as a national serviceman. After a few weeks' training, I was sent to Palestine. We didn't fight, we were ambushed. If in a fight, it would have been different, but there was never a fight. They never showed themselves. Occasionally they did, and they got very badly wiped out, but not. Mostly it's undercover. Stab you in the back from behind.
We had it 2 or 3 times. The cars would come in during the night, shoot a guard on the gates of the tented camp, and then go round, drive round in between the tents, firing at the tents, and killing the chaps inside. They said they were the Stern Gang, and I think they were just a group of people that wanted to cause trouble.
The troop train in front of us got blown up. There's 26 dead. That was one thing. The architect was Mr. Biggin. He was supposed to be respectable, but he wasn't. He was the head of the terrorist groups. He was made, I think, a Prime Minister when they got their freedom. Not a very nice man.
My father used to say, I'm not anti-English at all. I'm anti-British foreign policy insofar as it affects Ireland and insofar as it affected Palestine. I think that there was a lot of similarity between the Irgun and the old IRA at that time. The Irish fight for independence was the first time when guerrilla warfare actually took place. In fact, the British thought this was a very cowardly way of fighting a war. While they had 10 to 1, it was okay, but the fighting from behind walls, they said, and various things, that ambushes were not the way to do it. But it was the way that Ireland did it, and it was the way that Ireland won its independence.
In May 1947, a year after the attack on the King David Hotel, Britain announces that it will withdraw its troops and transfer responsibility for the Mandate of Palestine to the United Nations. The road to a Jewish state is free.
My father finally returned to Palestine on the eve of independence. The first day that Israel was declared an independent state, he was back in Palestine.
On May 14th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaims the State of Israel. He becomes the country's first Prime Minister.
For my father, the Irgun was first and foremost an organization that had political principles. and a vision, a very strong and specific vision for the state of Israel. He felt that Begin was not up to that. He felt that Begin didn't understand that. He felt that Begin wasn't of the caliber to kind of be a partner in promoting that kind of vision. My father always used to say, a proud Jew doesn't talk about being a proud Jew. If you're a proud Jew, you're a proud Jew, and you stand tall. And Begin talked about how you need to be a proud Jew. And in a sense, that's kind of, in a nutshell, what he thought about Israel, that they were, fighting these battles, and they were a sovereign nation state. They didn't acknowledge that.
Nobody ever said, I'm sorry, or they are sorry. Nobody ever reached my family, my mother, who had no help except for her family. And nobody said, we are sorry for what have happened. It could have been different. And I'm still feeling very angry about it, because they denied their part in what happened.
זה נורא מעניין אותם לדעת. את זוכרת את היום הזה של הפיצוץ בקינג דיוויד?
אז שמעתי, אני הייתי בבית ושמעתי את הפיצוץ, אבל הייתי ער, וירדתי הכניסה הייתה מהמלך ג'ורג', אז ירדתי למלך ג'ורג'.
After the bombing, the family took my mother with 2 babies to Tel Aviv. And then when she came back to Jerusalem, all her things were gone. She found that everything that was movable in her apartment was taken away.
הוא לקח אותך ביד והלך לעבוד. והוא אהב אותך, הוא אוהב שהוא גם הילדה הכי חכמה, הילדה הכי... הוא היה בחור נהדר.
I was very angry with Mr. Begin and with the Irgun as a whole organization, because they never said they were sorry about what happened. They never admitted their responsibility. They never spoke with the family, never said a word to our family or to other families. And I felt that something is wrong in their behavior, and I wanted to tell it to somebody, to say something about it. And then I wrote a letter to Mr. Begin, who was at the time a member of parliament, a member of Knesset. מלבד זאת, גם אילו הייתה הודעה מתקבלת ברצינות המתאימה, וגם לו הייתה יוצאת הוראה לפינוי המלון, הרי ברור שפעולה כזו לוקחת קצת יותר מאשר 15 או 20 דקות שנותרו מאז הקריאה הטלפונית של הנערה. בבניין היו מאות אנשים, אזרחים עברו לתומם לידו, האמן לי כבדמים מרובים עלתה לי כתיבת מכתב זה. סלח לי כי התרדתיך, בכבוד רב, רות שמשי למדן.
There were always battles between armed men and armed forces. We never used the method of assassination. We never planned hurting civilian population. We always used to warn them away from the zone of danger. We never used terror, never.
Whenever he's asked about this, Mr. Begin and also other of his Irgun, they never answer you directly. It's sort of automatic answers. Since then, I never tried to talk or to ask anyone of the Etzel or Irgun, and I had no connection with them.
Nothing changed in 1948. There was no decision that marked the end of a period. You fight for independence, you achieve that goal. Business as usual, right? Nothing changed. And then in January 1949, there were elections to the Constituent Assembly. The purpose of the Constituent Assembly was to write a constitution. What happened was that Ben-Gurion declared that Israel is not ripe to write a constitution. And therefore, he dismantled the Constituent Assembly, and he declared it to be the first parliament. My father got up from his seat in the session of parliament, and he cried out, "Putsch." Meaning that basically Ben-Gurion had hijacked a democratically elected assembly for purposes other than the purposes that it was elected for. Those remarks were removed from the protocol of the Knesset. There's no evidence for that anymore. And in a way, there's no evidence for that spirit. So in that sense, the story of my father is the story of Israel.
אבא שלי היה גאה מאוד כל חייו בפעולת מלון המלך דוד. הוא חינך את אחותי ואותי מגיל מאוד מאוד צעיר, שהחירות היא ערך עליון. מגיל מאוד צעיר הוא ייעד אותי בעצם, הוא תמיד אמר לי שהוא מקווה שאני אהיה הרמטכ"לית, האישה היחידה בצבא ההגנה לישראל. אבא שלי מאוד מאוד נפגע קשה, סירבתי להתגייס לצבא, כי אי אפשר היה להיות ישראלי בלי להיות חייל בצבא הישראלי בכלל בתקופה ההיא. ובייחוד עם הערכים בבית שאני גדלתי עליו, והוא ניתק איתי קשר, הוא אמר לי, את לא ביתי יותר, הוא לקח את זה מאוד קשה, הוא אמר לי, מה שיושב עלייך שיבה. מצא אותי בעצם בדור אחר לגמרי. והדור שאני גדלתי לתוכו, פתאום מה שקרה זה שמי שביקש את החירות שלו היו הפלסטינים. זה מאוד מורכב, זה לא פשוט, משום שכישראלית מאוד הזדהיתי עם רעיון החירות הפלסטינית. התחלתי לעשות סרטים שבעצם חלק גדול מהם זה על רעיון החירות הפלסטיני.
My father used to say that what Israel has established was a shtetl with an army. They have the army, they have the government ministries, they have the ministers, they have the bureaucracy, they have the technocrats. But they don't have the spirit that, for my father, was a necessary condition. The fact of the matter is that today, 70-odd years later, Israel still has no constitution. Israel still has no fundamental moral, ethical document that will structure what Israel's identity is all about. What is Israel? Who is Israel? Who is a member? Israel recently passed a law called the Nationality Law. And this nationality law basically entrenches Israel's identity as a Jewish nation state. And that also encapsulates everything that my father thought was wrong about the state of Israel. You don't work so hard and fight so hard for a Jewish nation state. You had to establish an Israeli nation state with an Israeli nation with a renewed sense of identity. And, 70 years after 1948, they pass a Jewish nation-state law that basically defines Israel as an exclusive Jewish state. The ideas of my father are still very relevant.
אסור לי בעצם לשפוט אותו ואת הדור שלו מהמקום שאנחנו נמצאים בו היום. משום שהם חיו בתקופה אחרת לגמרי, ואני לא בטוחה שאם אני הייתי חיה בתקופתו, לא הייתי לוחמת כמוהו למען העצמאות שתהיה לנו כמדינה. ובעצם כל הסוגיה הזו של מי לוחם חירות ומי טרוריסט, בסופו של דבר, איך שלא מסתכלים על זה, התשובה היא שזה תמיד תלוי בנקודת המבט של המתבונן. אבל אחרי כמה שנים, כשדיברנו על זה, אז הוא אמר לי, ביתי, את כמו אבא שלך. כאילו, הוא פתאום הייתה בו איזושהי גאווה שלא הלכתי, שלא הוא ולא אני הלכנו בתלם, שהלכנו אחרי הרעיונות שלנו ואחרי הערכים שלנו.